Thank you very much for joining us today. We have Panzora's CEO and advisor to the Land Game. We have Paul McNeil. Paul, where are you joining us from? Where are you in the world?
I am in Texas.
Oh,
cool. And
we got another Texan here.
Tabalo Torres. I had written it.
You're not having a good day with names, are you today?
I am not.
My Starbucks name is just Chris, but yeah, I'm operating out of Los Angeles, but primarily I'm in Texas, so usually between Fort Worth and Austin.
What company do you represent here today?
Yeum.
Cool.
No,
And Triba. And Triba.
Synergy.
And we have Sam Hebda from Triba and White Rabbit Enterprises. And we have me, Marcy Turman, just south of London, along with Amna, also just south of London. So thank you everybody for today on Friday, the 5th of September, 2022. And we're here today to talk about Ether and the Ethereum network, being called the merge, the purge, the verge, and some people are adding the splurge onto that.
Yeah.
So on September 6, 2022, 11:34 a.m. UTC, the long-awaited Ether merge happened, and it happened pretty seamlessly, I have been told, where Ether moved from a proof of work system to a proof of stake system where transactions are confirmed through staking Ether as opposed to a mining system. Now, what that meant was, in a heartbeat, this software upgrade that was years in the planning has nearly eliminated the energy needed to confirm transactions on the Ethereum chain. This has to be a good thing, right?
Mm. What do you think, Tabalo?
I'll be the first to do it. So one of the big shifts for that's happened since they did the merge is essentially with proof of stake, and the SEC and the chairman Gary Gensler waking up to the fact that you have to stake 32 ETH to participate fully, and that level of capital involvement with Ethereum has basically them signaling to the market, the media, the press, how the SEC has authority over all Ethereum transactions. Now, what does that mean? I think they still kind of got to get their ducks in the row about how they make it easier and usable for investors, or if that has some obligations for the Ethereum Foundation. And there's a lot of different perspectives that you can take about it. Like if you were to ask a Bitcoin maximalist type person, they would say everyone's already known Ethereum. I've heard that judgment already be called before this media even hit the news, and that's because of the pre-sale elements Ethereum Foundation had when it first coined Ethereum and was raising financing for it. So I guess that can kind of set the stage, but it's a new shift for investors and regulators, and how do they adopt innovation in a very accommodative way, restrictive, to basically a new asset class that's building hope for people who can build in a decentralized fashion. So.
Yeah, I mean, I could throw in from a non-US perspective, being one of the few people that isn't in Texas, that is outside of the US. What the SEC have done has actually gone beyond whether it's a security token or not. There was always a debate: is it a security token? Is it not a security token? And that's something you've always been able to work around. They've gone a step further. What they've said is the Ethereum network is the payment rails are US governed. They're saying that the Ethereum protocol is governed by the US. Now that calls into question whether I, as a regulated entity outside of the US, am I going to be able to use it? Am I going to be able to trade it? Because does my hedge fund need to now be registered with the SEC, even though I have no US investors, even though I have no nexus in the US? Do I now have to be registered with the SEC if I'm going to use Ethereum? Because it's now a payment system, and by definition is within the US. It would be like operating within a US bank. So that's question one. Second question, it certainly calls into question whether I'll invest in any projects as a fund based on Ethereum. Why would I? It's for me. I now have to be if I accept this stance by the SEC, then I have to decide. I may as well just move up and move to the US, because I'm going to have to be regulated by the SEC anyway. So why am I also going to be regulated in another jurisdiction? I may as well just set up in the US. So actually, I think it's a question for other regulators around the world. Are they going to let the US basically become a monopoly on blockchain projects? Because that's essentially what the SEC is saying. They're saying, if you want to use this, you've got to be regulated by us. Well, the other regulators, the other governments are asleep at the wheel. I don't think they recognize the implications that in it for them for losing fintech to the US. I mean, that's where I stand as a non-US regulated participant. I mean, Paul, what's
Yeah, a couple different points that both of you have sort of brought up. I think we have to still remain patient with regular trying to figure this industry out, because just yesterday, Rostin Benham was the chair. He came out and said Bitcoin and Ethereum are in fact commodities, and that he's saying that Ethereum is not a security. So the jury is still out on if Ethereum is going to be classified as security or not. And I think because you have both of these regulators fighting for the opportunity to regulate this case, you got the CFTC on one side, SEC on the other side. And right now, I think they're duking it out. We still have to wait to see who's going to win this battle. If the CFTC wins, I think you're fine. If the SEC wins, then I think then it might be some concern. And even then, I think guidelines will come out as to how you guys operate, rather you're not.
From a token perspective, I agree. What concerns me actually much more isn't so much Ethereum status, because you can always, if it's a security, you can always put safeguards in place. It's actually the payment rail aspect. It's the aspect of using the Ethereum network, because they've been quite specific. They've said the majority of nodes are based in the US. That makes it under US jurisdiction. And if they're talking about nodes, they're talking about payment processing. They're talking about transaction processing. That's where my concern is, and that's where I think non-US participants should have real concerns about this.
And to tag on to that, when the rest of the world or any sort of user in this metaverse does transactions through the Ethereum ecosystem, it's opening Pandora's box about how these virtues of decentralization are getting corrupted in front of our eyes about the U.S. claiming centralized authority on the matter. So it's deep on what we've talked on last discussions about how it really goes back to that central conversation about decentralized governance and centralized command and control, and more specifically the flaws that have been brought to society through hyper centralized and always centralized power. So
I mean, certainly from my perspective, I don't want to sound like I'm a complete downer on proof of stake, because I think there's definite improvements that users gain from that in terms of transaction quantity, in terms of potentially transaction costs. But I think that's going to be limited in Ethereum's case. So there are real benefits benefits. But I think you're absolutely right. I think this should be a conversation that's broadened outside of the US. The non-US regulators and governments start recognizing what this statement means, and start opening up the debate. Because what I will say is, we may not agree with everything the SEC do, but at least they're thinking about it. At least they are actually looking at the problem. And I think the problem isn't that the SEC are looking at it. I think the problem is other regulators aren't. And I think there needs to be a much broader conversation about how we can keep the benefits of decentralization for everyone globally, and still find a way to weed out bad actors. I think ultimately that's what everyone wants. It's just the approach that's used to adopt that, I think, is up for debate.
Yeah, I think a lot of the concerns that you're talking about comes from that article from Cointelegraph that was published on September 20th. The SEC's lawsuit claims jurisdiction about ETH nodes are clustered in the U.S. But one part of that article, and I think this is where sort of I believe, it says, at this stage, it is unclear whether such a claim will hold up in court or whether there is any legal precedent at stake. And so that's the thing, is that I think we have to remain patient and let's let this play out, because while there might be a concern, this very well might get thrown out because they might not have legal precedent to do it.
Absolutely, and the first thing, if I hadn't said before, I would absolutely say now. I am by no means a lawyer, so I rely on secondhand information for where this sits legally in terms of the U.S. legal system. So yeah.
Yeah, well, Aaron, he's an Australian lawyer. He's a senior research fellow at MIT. He said that the distributions of Ethereum nodes is largely irrelevant to the case at hand, explaining that the fact that we've gotten a U.S.-based plaintiff, a U.S.-based defendant, and transactions flowing from the U.S. is what is most relevant here. It doesn't matter whether the payments was done on Ethereum, MasterCard, or any payment network for that matter. And this is mostly talking about the Spark token, which Ian Bolano was actually, this is who they're suing, going after, and it's more about the Spark token than it is about the Ethereum network itself. So I think that's what we have to also take consideration.
Yeah, I think the that's actually what surprised a number of people. They had, assuming their claim is upheld. They had everything they needed, as you say. US actor, US customers. They didn't need to bring the Ethereum node element into it. So I think that's where people's concern lays. It's almost like they're trying to use this. It's a regulator standard approach. First, they go for when they want to extend, when they want to a land grab, they'll go for an easy option first. Then they'll go for a small option second, and that sets legal precedent to then go for the big guys. And that's the standard roadmap that they follow. And I think people's concern are, this is the first step. This is the easy one. Then they'll find some small guys to pick off who maybe not be US, and then when they've got that precedent, then they'll go for the for a lot of players in the space. And I think that's where people's concern lays. So certainly that's my view on it. So something which I've been thinking about over the past week, and this just came out. If this is upheld, and that's a big if, as we've just said, what do you guys think about the possibility that blockchains actually might start segregating? That you could then have a fork of Ethereum that says, yeah, okay, these nodes are going to do a geolocation check on the node and will not participate with a node that is US based, and actually build that into the code. Could you see that as being a possibility if the SEC make this judgment stick, so that you actually get a fragmentation of the blockchain?
Personally, I think the cat's out of the bag. The big thing about these technologies is that they make government enforcement, and they can operate cross borders with impunity for the most part, because it's just using internet protocols and So I think your question is if there will be more of a nation state direction toward blockchains and how nation states build a perimeter
Not
on
so much
their
nation
blockchain.
states, but me as a non-US participant, I would have real concerns if doing anything without getting US registration if that was upheld. If there was blockchain that actually part of the protocol, part of the node software operation was to proof of location, in effect, find a way to identify where it excluded, not included, just my nation state, but it excluded North Korea, Russia, and America, because they're my three problem areas. Do you think something like that could gain traction, so that I can use it, knowing that I'm not going to step on the toes of the SEC, and I'm not going to be dealing with bad acts of nation states?
I think that's certainly plausible, and especially with people relying on Swift payment rails. But I think it begs the larger question about how the West leading the global economy, but yet restricting economics. So that's always kind of been the uniqueness about, okay, we're the leader of the free world and free trade, but we're going to restrict trade. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would know, just like I've always been with a lot of this stuff, I think almost anything is plausible. When Ethereum first split from ETH and ETC, no one saw that. I mean, no one ever thought that would happen. Vitalik and those guys made the decision to fork the chain, and all of a sudden you got two different assets. Even with this most recent shift to proof of stake, we have ETHW that's out there now, which is the proof of work Ethereum that still sort of exists and is trying to hang on. But almost all of this, with this technology being so new and 13 years in existence, we are still trying to get our minds around how this all works, how it all plays out. We're talking no borders, global infrastructure, as long as you got the internet, satellite systems. I mean, where this ultimately goes, I think almost any of these ideas are possible. Could we see it be to where there is a certain chain that operates outside of these heavy regulated areas? I think there is a possibility for that to happen. And will those users benefit for it? And will governments have to eventually come back and recant and come back against that regulation, take it out of play? I think they have to, because of the way it's a global system. It's hard.
Yeah, I think that's possibly the case, because no country, not even one as large as the US, is going to want to be excluded from an ecosystem that is global, as you say, that is using the newest technology, is global and has mass acceptance. I think it may actually trigger changes in the way the SEC and US courts govern international transactions. Because I think, again, as a non-US participant, one of the big that I would have with Ethereum as it potentially stands is US courts say they have the jurisdiction to cast judgment internationally if it uses US infrastructure. It's the only nation state that I'm aware of that does that. You had the case recently where Russian courts said, "Oh, Facebook are in breach of this, and these are the consequences." Mark Zuckerberg was in the US, could shrug his shoulders and say, "Yeah, okay, well, I'm not in Russia. I don't really care." That does apply with the US, because the US courts will extradite any US national to charges in the US, and it's the only country in the world that I'm aware of that their courts claim the right to do that. That makes a non-US president nerve of any kind of infrastructure that the US claims is theirs. It makes it very difficult.
But don't
as far as go ahead.
No, I would say don't a little bit of that. Granted, this is not with crypto, but with GDPR and the EU. I mean, the EU, there are U.S. companies that have to GDPR standards, and again, because like I said, the world is now operating in a global environment. I think we're going to see this. China, they have their digital CBDC that they've issued, and how is that going to play on the global scale? And a lot of I would not want to be a regulator, not at all.
Yeah, and it comes back to what I said earlier. It's easy to throw stones at the regulators, but would you really want to be trying to do their job at the moment? Because it's something completely new, completely really exciting, and how do you deal with it? Yeah, so I agree, Riley. It's very difficult.
When it comes to the court and legal structure, it gets very hairy very fast. Whether they're going to go with U.S.-led admiralty law imposement or more of a Canaan law type of judgment on international level. But I big question here, and if I put myself in the shoes of a non-American, primarily in Eurasia and Africa expected to be, the strongest emerging market and growth opportunities for a lot of the Earth, and even parts of Eastern Asia, is that they would, if I was non-American, I don't know why I would let the U.S. impose further economic market control about the ability to transact and innovate or build into U.S. federal judgment. So it seems foolish, at least from a global efficiency standpoint, and then more importantly, someone in an armchair in D.C. or New York shouldn't be able to tell someone in the Ivory Coast how they're allowed to business.
How their DeFi contract should be structured, which is essentially what we're talking about.
So are you saying that the U.S. is overstepping their bounds and may in fact use dominance because people will start looking at other alternatives?
I think there's a bit of nuance of the dollar-led payment rails trying to encompass the Ethereum payment rails.
Absolutely.
But the foreign exchange markets are not just going to let that happen. So I think that's kind of where the U.S. is overstepping in terms of respect to our global neighbors.
Interesting. It comes back to I think what you said, Paul, that they're trying to take a model they understand, which is the US dollar market, which quite legitimately it's the US currency. They have a stake in that. They have the right to regulate that, and they're trying to use that same model with Ethereum, or perhaps we don't know. The jury's out on this, but this is what it appears they're trying to do. And yeah, I agree with you. I think perhaps if they are looking at it like that, the rest of the world will look at that as perhaps regulatory.
Yeah, and right now, I think that, and I think right now one of the main that had out there, it goes back to what Bitcoin started this whole conversation. What is money? How is money regulated? Who's regulating money? Payment rails, Visa, MasterCard, those guys have had a heyday at controlling the rails, and now all of a sudden you have a technologist coming in and starting to compete with them. The whole Jack Mallers is just getting $80 million to build out the Lightning Network. MicroStrategy is now building on the Lightning Network. Jack Dorsey's building on the Lightning Network. That network's going to come into play with Swift. You got Swift trying to upgrade itself. This whole thing is just massive, and getting your head around it is hard.
Yeah.
That this change in the Ethereum network, it really hasn't done anything to deal with the gas price issue, has it?
No,
Not yet.
Not yet.
I'd add some color there for Marcy. So in terms of the specific price action, not exactly, but in the geopolitical meta-analysis and the regions, Eurasia has national security issues that they buy their energy to keep their stoves on and keep their food frozen, beholden to dollars and U.S. Fed policy. So that's a national security problem of Eurasia that you have to get into how this would settle in international courts.
That's a very interesting. Sorry, please.
Oh, that was it. I think that's like most people don't understand how to tether these together, but it is tethered in the judgments.
That's a very interesting, but in practical terms, transactions on the Ethereum blockchain are quite expensive, and it makes it difficult for many projects, including especially smaller projects, to consider using Ethereum, which has kind of opened the doorway to a lot of other tokens. Is it the case now with the SEC really locking its steely gaze onto Ether? This is going to give an opportunity to some of the other Rail tokens to come to the front.
Who's going to answer that one first?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it is, though, and I think this is natural market forces allowing technology to flourish, right? And so if the Ethereum fees do remain high, projects will seek out other blockchains to operate on, and we're seeing that happening with the Polkadots, with the Cardanos, right? People are starting to use other blockchains because of the fees, but at the same time, I think when the opportunity is situated to where the fees do come down, I think you'll see the adoption of Ethereum continue. But Ethereum being the bigger platform, I believe it's going to maintain its dominance, and you will have the other platforms. To me, I akin it to Apple Store, Android Store, right? You have the Play Store. You have different platforms where people decide to build their apps on. It just depends on where they want to go. Everyone believes that Apple, having your product in Apple, is by far better, but there's also a lot of adoption with the Play Store. So I think you're going to see the same thing happen with blockchains.
Yeah, that's not unreasonable. I mean, you can already see it because on the Ethereum network, they rely a lot on layer 2 networks to keep the transaction costs down, which is great for large projects. So larger projects can go onto the Ethereum blockchain, and they have the liquidity to take advantage of those layer 2. So you can see Ethereum being the home for large, well-funded projects. Smaller projects that perhaps don't have that footprint will go to some of the others where the layer 1 network is that much cheaper because they don't need that liquidity profile to be able to benefit from layer 2. I mean, I think that's where you're going to see it. So yeah, Marcy, I think smaller projects will continue. And actually, if you look at I think it was the London release on the Ethereum blockchain, that was solely built ahead of proof of stake to stop the price collapsing when they did proof of stake. So they included a lag so that prices won't just be changeable; they move with lag. So it was to stop the price shooting up and down, or once proof of stake came in, coming down quite quickly. So clearly they are gearing themselves towards a larger project marketplace. That's the business model that the foundation appears to be adopting, I would say.
And Marcy, I would also add, in terms of the competitive landscape, the liquidity aspect is the number one in like the market making maturity that it's already achieved. But it depends on your audience, right? So if you try to expect how any given audience would get, Credit Suisse may have a different perspective than JP Morgan about how Ethereum should be regulated. And as far as the expensiveness goes, I call it a lot because I noticed the Ethereum fees were a lot, and each transaction was $3 to $5. So the proof of stake has proven the less energy, it's gotten cheaper and there's less congestion, which does help adoption. But again, if an audience or a group has more oriented, which is a big deal with transactions, then they're not going to just run to Ethereum, so.
And also $3 to $5 is lowish, but not if you're a small trader trying to use a DeFi exchange. If you try and do $25 and your fees are $3 to $5, that's like 20% of the value of your transaction. So it kind of rules out decentralized exchanges for small amounts without a layer 2 network. So now, obviously, they have layer 2 on a lot of DeFi, so that mitigates that.
Yeah, and exactly that will prevent emerging market adoption. So emerging markets not going to pay $3 to transact. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think it's important to point out that not all transactions are on blockchains are the buying and selling of merchandise. Things like voting, and a lot of tokens have voting built into their protocol. How do you manage that when you have thousands and thousands of people as members of your project all voting on something when something costs $3 to $5 per
vote
transaction? Yeah, per
yeah.
vote.
Yeah, no, it certainly makes non-financial smart contract use cases start to get expensive without layer 2 support.
Yeah, I was just reading an article on the ETH gas fees after the merge, and it says that the merge did not lower fees directly. There was nothing built into the technical upgrades of the merge that would specifically lower fees. However, what it did accomplish was to create the technical environment necessary for gas optimizations. And so that's the thing that people have to remember, is that while it didn't initially, but in addition to that, I've also seen articles that say that the gas fees have dropped dramatically. There was an article came out in April that said from November of last year, 90% of the fees had dropped. And then even as we led up to the merge, it shows that article after article is saying gas fees are going lower. I don't know if what's dropped, even though adoption continues to increase, the fees supposedly are coming down.
Where it does seem to have done successfully is it stopped these spikes up that you were getting to $25 to $30, $90, which was it got to the stage you were holding back doing transactions based on where the gas was going at that moment in time, which was crazy. So yeah, absolutely. I think the average price has come down a lot, and it's done that by removing these big spikes that you would get that were commonplace a year ago. So that, I think, has been a real success.
And also a flaw with Ethereum is that, from a security standpoint, is that a malicious actor could send you a transaction, your approval. So like you can just get sent XYZ scam coin, and there's no way, and it's tied to your wallet forever, and you'd never even intended for that. So those type of things are big deals, at least in terms of the cleanliness of and the hygiene of your bookkeeping. So a lot of things to consider.
Can that happen network that supported secondary tokens? So, for instance, Bitcoin, the original test Omni, the Omni network, you could do the same thing. You could send a token to a particular address who didn't request it. Now it was this dust which was linked to Omni transaction. I forget what it's called. Now, but the new name. But you have the same problem. You could be sent a tainted Bitcoin, for instance. I could be a hacker, and I could send you a Bitcoin from my stash from a tainted wallet, and all of a sudden you've got the authorities saying, where did this Bitcoin come from? Why are you holding this Bitcoin? And you've then got to explain, I don't know, it was sent to me. So I think that's something that's true of anything with public addresses or public account numbers, in effect.
I'd add the slight nuance for the audience and whoever's listening, is that at least with Bitcoin, you're receiving the value of the coin. Like, I'm looking at my Yetum.eth ENS, and it's like I have several tokens that they're just complete scam contracts.
Yeah.
Now they're tied to my business. So
yeah,
it's like I don't.
It's true. It's true, because your wallet that you use to, let's say, send to another participant, if they check your address and they see all these scam tokens in there and they're nothing to do with you. It's so yeah, I get that. I get that. It's
At least with
I mean,
the
we had
Bitcoin, you'd have the money. You'd have the
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Satoshis with it.
absolutely. I mean, we had a. I'm not. This was not scam in any way, shape, or form. It was split. But when OMG launched their smart contract token last year, I think it was last year, and they split for OMG. You got a what was it, Bubba or something along like that, and they appeared in the wallet. Now, our hedge fund date says it has to be the top 20 tokens by market cap. Well, that wasn't in it, so we had to go to our auditor to ask them, what do we do with this? And he said, well, we buy it. We didn't buy it. It was given to us. And a similar thing. And there are things that happen on the blockchains that don't happen in regular security transactions. And I think everyone is learning as they go along. How do you deal with it? And the auditor said, well, you didn't buy it, sell it, that's fine. And they just put a note in it. There are little things like this that just have never come up before, and people are looking at how to deal with it.
Yeah, and like a usual thing any normal financial person would use is transfer money between accounts, things like that. Those aren't taxable transactions. They're just transfers. But if you look at the blockchain, looks like transaction 0x to 0x.
Yep.
Are they going to tax you on a transfer just because they're all transactions, but it's really just the agent going from wallet A to wallet B?
Yep.
So
yeah. So it's almost like somebody has given you this value, which could, as you say, the taxman could potentially. Though I think most jurisdictions it's on sale that you're taxed. So it's most jurisdictions would see it as an asset transfer, which you now own, which you then, when you sell it, you pay tax on from a zero price. That certainly was the case with the split, with the new token. The question comes if they then ask you, well, did you receive it because you did work for them? Because then it's income, and then it's a whole different ballgame. So yeah, I can see it can cause sort of unexpected circumstances, unexpected eventualities,
and room for exploitation.
Absolutely,
from, like, financial security standpoint.
So. You can now see a situation where there's a blackmail where somebody says, "Pay me this, or I'm going to send 100,000 of these scam tokens into your wallet address, into your regulated wallet address." I mean, we laugh about it, but it's a difficult situation, especially once if they go down the route of having named regulated wallets, which can you can be penalized for holding non-authorized securities in. Then yes, then it does start to get.
Yeah, imagine a threat actor or a malicious actor from Iran or North Korea, and they just implicate XYZ leader with a Bitcoin transaction or Ethereum transaction, and then by default through the law and the enforcement, then they are implicated through a non-sanctioned economic entity, even though they're not complicit. But on the blockchain, they're complicit. So.
Yeah, and it never goes away. So all of a sudden, their guilt can be discovered in 10 years' time, which makes it even harder to, because someone brings it up when it happens. Oh well, I knew nothing about it. So that happens in 10 years' time. I can't remember what was going on 5 years ago, let alone 10 years ago, in the various blockchain accounts. So yeah, I guess that just confirms that addresses you own and use, you should monitor and keep an eye on and keep alerting on. So something unexpected does happen, you're aware of it.
Moving away from regulation and jurisdictional discussions, which you guys seem really interested in, one of the things that was pointed out to me about the Ethereum network is that there is and this is what's caused the SEC to be able to make the claims that it does, that there are limited number of nodes confirming Ethereum transactions, and that's been exacerbated by this change in the network. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's a limited number of that control most of the nodes. Yeah, and which has led to concerns not just on the regulation perspective, but also on censorship perspective. And that's I mean, moving on to the security of protocols. That's the concern I have with proof of stake. That's the concerns I have with it is it's too easy to it's not censorship resistant. I mean, you can see what happens with the Luna voting. He wanted to create a new chain, so there was just a wallet which their foundation controlled, which forced it through. You know, there was no the community didn't decide. The guy who was running it decided. You've got a very small number of Ethereum holders who are mostly associated with either one of the large exchanges or the Ethereum Foundation that will make the decision on the blockchain, and that's just how it is. And the other problem I have with it is it's moving. It's almost a retrograde step. It's moving us back to a situation where the people with the wealth more wealth, because the people with the Ethereum can stake it and generate more Ethereum. The guys with very little Ethereum get much more potential for reward. So as opposed to a proof of work where guys come up with a neat new way to maximize efficiency, like what you mentioned, Sabalo, surge power usage for Bitcoin, where essentially the power is free because it's power that would otherwise be wasted because of it's surge power. Really use that innovation to generate revenue. So that's my concern with the proof of stake. It's gone back to the old system of the banks or the new banks being the ones that accumulate most of that new ether.
Yeah, one of the things when you look at the node control and who control the nodes, and there are several that talks about different ones, the question becomes with these, if those who control them actually do have the power to shift them or to be able to, to again, go from decentralized to centralized. Does it really centralize everything if it is in fact just two that control 46%? And could those two collaborate together? And again, I was looking for information as to who are the two. Do you guys know who the two main addresses, who controls those addresses?
Isn't it a set of us, because I have a cap on the affect a single address group of wallet addresses. And what I heard, one of the big exchanges was one of them that owned a significant amount, and I believe the other was were the foundation, the foundation holders. That's what I believe is the case. But
yeah, because and this article that I just pulled up, it says while the U.S. accounts for 500 nodes and Germany accounts for 1,400 nodes, France ranks third. The point that I'm getting to is the same thing with mining. When everyone was concerned that China controlled, a majority percent of the Bitcoin, the real question is this: is that just because miners are there doesn't mean that China has control over all of them.
Agreed.
And so I don't know if that's the same case with these nodes. That yes, while a large amount of these nodes are in the U.S., would U.S. and Germany be able to collaborate together? And the question becomes maybe not. So even though there is some centralization, is it still decentralized enough that no one party can take control?
So these bring interesting points, and if you view it from an IT point of view, so I'm a citizen economist, I call myself, but my actual work involves cloud engineering and cloud infrastructure, and most of these Ethereum nodes run on Amazon Web Services, and these cloud providers run the infrastructure for most of the web, and in France and Germany as well. So the thing is, if there's a cyber Pearl Harbor type of thing that has to Amazon Web Services, this logic that the U.S. holds the most nodes would quickly be circumvented if the infrastructure and this claim that the hardware that ties the node gives them judicial leverage, that could change in a moment's notice through some chaotic event. So, and it runs, or Jeff Bezos could have more political will and say, "Hey, I'm gonna turn them off," or so that's an element to the security of it.
The and that would certainly with mine, if they were using mining clouds, much more fluid, and I could understand that. With proof of stake, they're looking much more at the entities that own the Ethereum, that control, not own, excuse me, control the Ethereum that powers those nodes. That's the nexus they're looking at, and that's a very different prospect, because it wouldn't matter. Let's say it was Coinbase that controlled clients use their service, they staked their Ethereum, and they were one of the large holders. It wouldn't matter if they put that into Germany or put that into Sweden. It's a US entity, and as far as the SEC are concerned, that means that collection of nodes is controlled by a US entity. So if the sum of those is over half, which is what they're arguing it is, therefore this is a US network. It's a US controlled network. So that's where it's different, I think. Or could, again, we're talking about possibilities here, because this hasn't even gone to the courts yet. But the concern is that with mining, it was where the rig based, because that's there's legal precedent for that. That if you know where the mining takes place, the jurisdiction where the computer is operating. But if it's a mass ownership question, then it's very different. Then you've got a situation: who controls those assets? Are they under American jurisdiction? We can therefore regulate them. So proof of stake is a much thornier issue, and it comes back to what we said earlier on. I think we don't know. This is all a big unknown in terms of legal precedent. So it comes back to, would you want to be a regulator at the moment? Because I don't think anyone really knows how this is going to pan out.
The part that makes me a bit sad is we have people who don't understand STEM, basically in charge of deciding the legalese of STEM. So that's something that bothers me, but that's why we have to educate so much. But Gab, exactly to your point, it's all about how you frame the rules, because when you say Ethereum controls the network because most of the nodes are in the US, those nodes are on AWS, on Amazon's networks. So it's like there's even a more abstract complexity to it of like, okay, a very strategic, large, global American enterprise owns the legitimate hardware for a lot of these nodes. So
no, absolutely, it's definitely a tricky situation.
As we draw to the end of our time together, let's take a very prosaic view. And so, Gavin, do you think that by the end of the year, Ether is going to be up or down from where it is now?
Well, I'm forever the optimist. I think the crypto markets as a whole will be higher than they are now. Will Ethereum outperform or underperform its peers? I suspect not, actually. I suspect it will underperform its smart contract peers up to the end of the year.
And just
I'm
moment.
interested in Paul's and Tabalo's view, actually, because
we'll absolutely do that in just a minute. Just say, if you would, give yourself a shout out where you work and what you're involved in.
Well, I work for the Panzora hedge fund. I'm a general manager, so I put together the models and the trading strategies for the fund.
Okay, and moving on to Tabalo, where do you think Ether will be by the end? And then give a shout out to your business.
Generally speaking, my view is that the market in dollar terms, everything, because of the contraction in capital markets. So that's just my general view. But to be more targeted about what would help me change that view is something that would trigger a large capitulation from legacy financial assets into digital assets. And those could be censorship-based, privacy-based, regulation-based, or lack of confidence in institutions, which would be the big one.
Interesting.
But yeah, that's kind of my view. So I monitor with my limited resources. What would trigger a capitulation like that?
And a shout out to your business.
I'm the founder of Yeetum, and we have a cloud business we're building to sort of train citizen cyber, crypto, and financial analysts and lower the barriers to entry to gain more confidence with cyber and money. And then, we have advisory and IT consulting we do as well with more strategic partners and group members.
Paul, where do you think there will be?
Yeah, so for Ether, I might lean a little bit more toward Gavin. I'm the eternal optimist, very, very optimistic with the markets. But that said, right along with Tavallo, the economic headwinds are strong right now, and as long as the Fed continues to tighten, I think we're going to see a continued downward suppression on the market. I think it was Willie Woo who said that the price is being suppressed politically right now. And so I think that's going to be across the markets. Now, Wes Tavallo also said there was an article that came out, and I forget exactly who was the one who said it, but he said basically that if consumers, which I'm not sure consumers really drive it, but if maybe it's an overall broad consensus, but if the trust in the central banks is lost, then we're going to see a over to digital assets. And so that might be one of the points that if we begin to lose faith in the central bank and what they're doing, especially with trying to control inflation and price, and these interest rates increases, we could see this exodus happen. This is known as October. Normally September is always bad for Bitcoin in the markets. October normally is good. So we'll see what happens. The chart, it seems like, could be at a very decisive point for the market to make a decision. If that's the case, then I think Ethereum could very well begin to outperform Bitcoin. I don't think there'll ever be the flippening. I don't think that'll happen, but that's sort of my my thought on it.
And your business is?
Yeah, so the Crypto Curator, if folks go to thecryptocurator.com, they pretty much will be able to get in contact with me. I normally put 3 articles a day on there, and those articles are articles that are trending by publication. So if multiple publications are writing about the same topic, those topics land on my website that I'm tracking mostly throughout the day. And if there's any breaking news or anything like that, I place it on there. A podcast and a video of the day, just to give folks the ability to see sort of all around what's going on. But yeah, just the cryptocurator.com.
Well, a great news resource, a really good website for people to keep on. Guys, thank you again so much for giving us your time on we will be moving these meetings in the future. We will probably be having them a little bit earlier in the day on a Thursday. You informed, because you always have an interesting voice and interesting opinions to add. And I just want to thank you so much for sharing this time with us.
Thanks, guys. Really enjoyed it.
Thank